William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I welcome you to another Two Hats special of community events. Let's look in and see what's really happening.
Good afternoon and welcome to Lambda Weekly. I'm Dave Taffet, and I'm here in the studio with Lerone Landis. The late Patti Fink is very late. She and Aaron are cleaning out Aaron's father's house down in New Orleans before they put it up for sale. You know, Aaron's dad passed away a while ago. Mm-hmm. But the lesbian thing about their weekend is that they've rented a U-Haul to bring some stuff back.
You know, she told me that. I tried not to laugh because I knew what they were going to do. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, you, come on, they couldn't be Ryder, it couldn't be any of the other moving companies. U-Haul, really?
They are card carrying.
Apparently.
Our guest is Buster Spiller, the late Buster Spiller.
Yeah, I guess so.
He's on his way. We just talked to him. He said, I'm right near the studio, and he wasn't as close to the studio as I guess he thought he was. But we're watching for him. Josh will run outside and open the door for him when he gets here, and he will come in. Yesterday was Jack Evans' funeral, his memorial service. He died a week ago, Thursday night, and so yesterday was the funeral service. Real sad. And it hit me afterwards why it was so sad. During one of the eulogies for Jack and George, and people for Jack and George, right? Because you can't say Jack without saying and George.
You think of one, you think of the other.
Mm-hmm. And they had been guests of ours several years ago. They were on talking about their, I think their 50th anniversary. They just passed their 55th. You know Jack and George from Marriage Equality Day. They were the first couple married in Dallas County after the marriage equality ruling. They were on the cover or the front page of the Morning News, but the front page of the New York Times. They were in People magazine. They were in newspapers in London, Paris, and in Germany. I saw an Asian newspaper had their picture in it. They were literally all over the world, and they got so much publicity after their marriage to each other, their religious marriage the year before. Mm-hmm. They were married, not at their church, but in order to make a statement about the Methodist Church not accepting and not allowing same-sex marriages in any of their churches. And their retired pastor asked them, he said, I would like to do a same-sex marriage. Their pastor was very ill. He had cancer that he was fighting. He said, before I die, I have to do this. It's just simply the right thing to do. They agreed. Well, they had this big wedding at Midway Hills Christian Church, and a big reception over at North Haven United Methodist Church. And it was, they went on a media tour that week. And they were just all over the city, on every TV station, on radio. They were in the paper. Aside from having to, work on the catering and the logistics in one church, two churches. I mean, that's a lot to do.
That is a lot.
Okay. Sunday, that was Saturday night. Sunday morning, Jack and George come into church. They usher on Sundays, so they were there. Eric Folkerth looks at them, says, I'm glad you're here. I'm surprised that, I'm surprised you made it this morning. How are you doing? And so Jack just said, that was great. What's next? George is more the stay-at-home type person. And George, if you're listening, we're going to get you out because we want you to stay busy. Jack wouldn't have any of it. He was the people person. He was the one who was always with other people, and anybody who met him, it was like, that's my new best friend.
That's what balanced them out.
It is what balanced them out. But George would sometimes say, let's just stay in tonight. And Jack's answer to that was always, we can do that when we're old. And Jack was 86 when he passed away. So anyway, very sad. Do you know one reason that it hit me? It was that we can stay home when we're old. I never thought of them as being older because they did more than most people our age.
Yeah.
And the other thing was, during the height of the AIDS crisis, I can't tell you, I just associated them with so many funerals. And when it was one funeral after another, sometimes you just didn't let yourself break down and cry.
Yeah.
And when Jack went, I did.
Yeah.
So, anyway, our guest today is Buster Spiller. Buster is Buster's a playwright. He's a grandfather and a father, and he's a great-grandfather also.
Yeah.
He's an actor and a teacher, and he does all kinds of things. Buster, would you get a job and keep it?
What? Would I get a job and keep it? I'm a Renaissance man.
I'm
You're
sorry.
supposed to do many things. I'm like the gay Maya Angelou.
Okay.
Because she was straight. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, Buster, thank you for the week that you were here. It was a terrible day. That was the day of the massacre in Orlando. And so obviously it had just happened just a few hours ago. So obviously that became, and I wasn't there that day. Another reason I'm glad you're back, because I wasn't in that Sunday. But Lerone has started this series that he wants us to do, and has been talking about our doing on racism in the LGBT community, homophobia in communities of color. Lerone, just talk for a minute about.
Well, what prompted this was a kind of a heated exchange with some other Facebook friends months ago, when Michael Sam came out in the article, and he said that, and this topic has been around for a while, it's nothing new, but it needs to be talked about more, but he said that he has felt more racism within the gay community than homophobia within the black community. And I just thought that was interesting, because everybody doesn't have the same experience.
Especially
me.
Well, especially since he came from a family where his father rejected him.
Exactly. So I was really surprised to hear him say that.
So that is interesting.
So I just thought, we had some previous guests on, so this is just one more show in continuation of that dialogue. And I just wondered, what are your initial thoughts about that? It's not a versus, it's just two issues, the homophobia in the black community, or any community of color, and racism within the racism within the LGBT community. Which one do you think is worse? From what do you see?
Oh God, for me, it's. I mean, golly, how do you compare the two? But for me, it's homophobia is a bigger issue for me, because I have the internal tools to deal with racism. I've had to deal with it my entire life, so that I could care less about that. It is what it is. But when Michael made that statement, I completely understood where he was coming from, and I agree. One, you have this guy who is beautiful. Michael Sams is so beautiful.
Yes, yes.
And his partner at the time,
I can't tell you. Have you met him?
I haven't. I would love to.
I did. We sponsored, and when I say we, our synagogue sponsored him to speak at the Holocaust Museum last year. What a sweetheart. He waited to speak to everybody, and there was one little Holocaust survivor who's in his 80s. He only wanted to get a picture with Michael Sam.
Oh, wow.
The picture of them hugging is like one of those, picture. What a sweetheart he is. And we've tried to get him on the show, and he's not in Dallas anymore now. So, yeah.
Yeah, but what compounded, I think, for him, his issue was his partner at the time was a white male. And then once, he really got big, I think that's when he saw, what was his normal as just being this guy that had an exceptional talent, who now was very high profile, and he's just like front stage center with this white guy who's like gorgeous. Then that's when he saw, I mean, he understood the racism also, but that's when he saw the racism within our community, because there were a lot of people that didn't care for that union. And for me, I thought it was silly.
You know, I was a little surprised by that. But yeah, if you saw some of the comments, especially from, you know, I have to be honest here, I saw a lot of comments from fellow black LGBT from them who had really negative comments about, oh, here's another rice queen
or another snow queen,
you know, I mean, yes, anything, you know, all these really derogatory terms towards anybody who dates a white person. So I don't know, I was taken back by that. I'm like, isn't this 2014 at the time?
What I would tell them, I said, listen, one, his background dictated that, you know, the whole issue of homosexuality was wrong. Every way he turned, you know, it was wrong. He went to school and, you know, you had team members that loved him, but this guy was the only one that stood in his corner and helped him be comfortable being Michael. So why would you have an issue, you know, with that? There were probably other black LGBT, people on that campus that may have wanted to have dated him, but they did not. They didn't come forward. This guy did that. So who are you now after the fact, when he has become famous, so to speak, to have a word to say about who he loves or who he's supposed to love? I mean, that's insane.
There was another piece. There were several pieces of that that Michael was telling that night that he spoke, but one of them was just simply the difficulty of going from a college campus environment, which tends to be much more open and liberal, and there were other, right, of course it depends. And I'm wearing my college T-shirt right now. Yet this one, when I went there, wouldn't have mattered then, didn't matter that when I came out at that time, you know. But on a college campus, there were other interracial couples dating, just because there were. So the fact that they were an interracial couple, then they graduated and all of a sudden they're in the real world. And so they were getting an awful lot of stuff from people criticizing for all these stupid reasons that, you know, that you're...
And I think that what, you know, I've always stated that discrimination or racism or whatever you want to call it, in one form is just basically a microcosm in a different form. And what you were seeing with, you know, the black LGBT community basically mirrors what's in the broader black community, where if, let's say, it's just Joe Blow from the street, he's white, and he's dating someone who's black, or she's dating someone who's black, and they're not famous, it doesn't matter. But the minute fame hits them, it's like, well, why would you select them when you could have selected someone from our community? You know, that whole thing. And it's like, well, if you didn't care from them when they didn't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of, why do you care now that they have some coins in their pocket? Why does it make a difference? And that's how black people think.
You know, before the show, Lerone and I were talking a little bit about some examples of stuff. And I said, you know, Lerone, I don't even know how to word this correctly, but when you first started with us, Lerone, we just were saying on the air at the time a co-host had left. We needed another co-host to join us. Lerone sent an email. He came on. Lerone and I hit it off. And we were just good on the air together. We could bounce things off each other in a way that with another co-host that I had before then, it was like coming to the studio sometimes, and you know, you never knew what the mood was going to be. And with Lerone, it was like, oh, the hour's over already. So he didn't become my co-host because he was black or because of anything else. He became my co-host because the two of us just hit it off. Yeah. Right. The fact that he was black, though, it's not that it never occurred to me. I thought, oh, good, we've never had a black co-host. To me, there was everything positive about it. There was also an age difference. He used to be younger than I am. I stopped aging.
Oh, God, David, let it go. Oh, my God.
But so we were representing, there were good differences there.
Yeah. But you know, the good point about that is that, well, which leads into me another subject. I want to talk about racism within the LGBT media, which you can definitely talk about that also. And the good thing about that is she gave me a chance where somebody else may not have given me a chance.
I couldn't tell from an email
You
that you were
couldn't.
white or black.
You
I didn't really care.
Right, exactly. But you still, when I came in, you could have been like, I don't know if I want a black guy on the show. I don't care how good he is. And some people, and as absurd as that sounds,
yeah.
It absolutely still happens.
Lerone Landis, that doesn't sound like a black name, just like Linus Spiller. So we both were going to come in and wow David. I get that all the time, though, and even with, phone voice, when they hear me on the phone, it's like, and they're expecting a white guy, because Linus, it gets no whiter than that. It means flaxen-haired. So, that's what they're thinking. When I come in, it's like, oh, you're Linus Spiller?
Yeah.
Oh, have a seat.
Right.
That's something that I've just never done. I've never, from a name or from talking to somebody, or especially from exchanging emails, expected somebody to look a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I guess there have been times where I've been surprised just because of a name that it could be a man or woman.
Yeah.
And I didn't know. And the famous story about that was Eddie Bernice Johnson, when she became the first black nurse at the VA hospital here, but they were hiring Eddie Johnson, a guy.
Wow.
That's true. Yeah.
So, they didn't know, I guess. She probably just Eddie Johnson left the Bernice out in her application.
Or even if she put Eddie B. Johnson, you still would know.
So
that's true.
And it didn't say on the application male or female, but she was applying at the time to be a nurse, and male nurses were much rarer, so it shouldn't have been that big a surprise. But once she started, she was treated horribly there. Yeah. But
So, just personally, let's go about your experiences. I'm sure whether blatantly obvious or, just kind of in a subtle way, we have all experienced racism from all communities.
True.
What about homophobia within the black community? Have you experienced any?
Absolutely, and even within the family.
Yes. I'm so glad you said that.
After the Orlando tragedy, on Facebook, I was like everybody else, and this was actually right after this show, expressing outrage like everyone else. And I had a cousin that I've connected with because on the Spiller side, we're just really spread out all over the place. So we're making a conscious effort to find all Spillers because we're all related, and there are white Spillers and black Spillers. So we're meeting up on Facebook.
Which are you?
I'm a Spiller.
No, a white Spiller or a black Spiller?
I think all the blood is mixed, because I met a white Spiller down in Houston via phone, and we put the dots together on a customer service call, and we both laughed, and she said, yeah, we're related, and the nature of that relationship, and we just laughed it off. But she was still kin. Who cares? Right. But after the Orlando situation, and I was expressing outrage, I had a cousin, Rachel, who she does live blogs, that she wanted to do a live blog and talk about all of this stuff, and the only person that was invited was me. So basically, she was preaching to me about the Word of God, not realizing that I'm an ordained minister. And it's like, you cannot discuss biblical matters if you're not coming with your stuff correctly. So that went on for an hour and a half, I swear to God. And then finally, it's like, cuz, I love you, but I got to let you go. My brain cells are about ready to explode.
We need to take a break. We have plenty more time. We're going to be discussing this, and we'll get right back to that point. We're talking to Buster Spiller, minister, teacher, actor, playwright, father, grandfather, great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather, white, black. He's all those things.
I'm Michael Jackson.
He's America.
He is.
He's America.
I'm a mess.
And I'm Dave Taffet here with Lerone Landis. We'll be back with more Lambda Weekly right after this.
I'm Patti Fink, and you're listening to Lambda Weekly on Knon 89.3 FM.
And we're back. I'm Dave Taffet here with Lerone Landis. Our guest is Linus Spiller. We're talking racism in the LGBT community, homophobia in communities of color. It's an ongoing series we've been doing. Buster was with us a few weeks ago. That was right after the Orlando massacre, and so obviously topic for that week changed, and I'm glad you came back, Buster. Okay, so you were talking with your cousin, and?
Yeah,
I mean, did she have anything to say, like...
just the usual bumper sticker Christian stuff. You know, using those examples that are used to bash people in the LGBTQ community, and I was refuting every last bit of it. You know, not just from what I've read, but, you know, just from a foundational looking at it from a historical, cultural, and political standpoint, which a lot of people do not use. They just read it and try to discern scripture that way, but you've got to look at it within context, because there were a lot of laws that were birthed from the law that had nothing to do with the law, but people still tend to pick what they want like it's a buffet, and it's not a buffet.
Yeah. So
Jesus never discussed, you know, any of that stuff. So, I mean, we get into it. Homophobia, transgenderism is another one, too, that, you know, a lot of people in the black community just don't get. And it's like, you don't have the right to do that. And I mean, even within our, not the Spiller side, but my mom's side, had a transgendered person in our family that was born with both sets of genitalia, but didn't have the resources, financial resources, like, let's say, a Caitlyn Jenner right now, to do what needed to be done. So who are you to say that, you know, it's a choice and, you know, all of that stuff? So I just see a lot of ignorance that basically exasperates the homophobia that's there.
You're old, like me.
I'm young.
but you're married.
I'm seasoned.
Do you find that there's less of it in younger generations?
Younger generations, and not just black, but all, it's a lot better. They're more accepting, and I've often made this statement: it's going to take all of us to die off first before you see all of this to disappear, because it's really anybody born after 1980, we're more or less okay.
You know, you were talking about transgender, and I was talking to somebody who's in the Army, or in the Air Force. He's transgender. He had his gender marker changed in February while he was serving in the armed forces. Now, it just became legal for transgender people to serve this past Friday. But he was actually legal status because his birth certificate matched the sex that he was. He said one way he dealt with it in the armed forces building up to that was that he never was picky about pronouns or anything like that.
Okay.
So he just let it all go, and he served under his female name until everything was changed. So I said, but what about on a person-to-person basis? And now this is 20-year-olds, mid-20s at most, that he's dealing with every day. He said, you know, there have been lots of questions, but it's been always just to understand. That there's a lot of misunderstanding. If you've never met or talked to a transgender person, you might not know what it is.
Right.
I thought that was promising. I thought that was wonderful. That, you know, I'm happy to answer questions. Just don't start with preconceived. And he said he's never had a problem in the armed forces.
And see, that
shocked
what
me.
Gregory shit when we did the interview with you, that was his experience during the period of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, that, yeah, they were there, but they had never quite met one like Tech Sergeant Kraft.
And Tech Sergeant Kraft is Buster's
My
husband.
Right.
My very cute husband.
I hope he's listening.
I hope so.
He's asleep right now.
Oh, well, he can listen to the audio.
But that was his experience, that they had never experienced someone like that. So while that policy was on the books, he had no issues, and we shared that I could go on the base once he was reassigned to Carswell. I could go on the base without him. They knew who I was, and it wasn't an issue. So, but he was one of the fortunate ones. We had a lot that were discharged.
Yeah.
So
I want to switch gears, go to community involvement a little bit. A woman that I used to work with years ago, straight woman, she was black and very curious, and she asked a really good question. I remember her asking me, why is it that every time a gay issue comes up in the media and in television, she goes, I only see white gay leaders. She goes, are there any black ones? I said, absolutely. So I started spouting off names like Phil Wilson, Keith Bourke, and here locally, Mr. Brown, absolutely they're here. And
Kurt Myers.
Kurt Myers, exactly.
Prosperity.
I mean, there's a lot of them, and so I thought, you know, I thought, you know, that's a really good question. I don't know why that is. I don't know if that's the fault of the main media.
As if, and this is what it seems like, if it's a gay issue, you go to a normal person. If it's a gay black issue, then you go to a gay black person.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
and when I say normal person, I'm being very sarcastic.
No, you're right. I see what you're saying. You know, it's always like the same players get interviewed, get the same quotes from the same players. It's like, you know, our community and our community leaders are much broader than that. I don't know whose fault that is. Is that the fault of the mainstream media just running to the sources that they know? Or, you know, are black leaders not trying to be noticed? I mean, I don't know. What do you think about that? And what can we do to change it?
I think the media can expand its net, but I'm not going to fault the media. We have to place ourselves in front of media to generate those stories. Anytime I'm called to do any type of interview or to speak on a panel or whatever, it's always an absolutely, what's the date? Let me put it on my calendar. But you have others that want to be gay or lesbian within the community without anyone knowing their business or whatever. They're not at the level that, you know, myself, that, you know, that I'm at. Or that CD's at, and I'm just speaking about local members, or Kirk, you know, who we always give all the interviews. But we have to be more willing to do that, and then even at a national level, you know, more entertainers, more athletes, they've got to be forthcoming. I mean, if white LGBT members have not lost jobs, you know, whether it's on the field or in front of a television camera, have some faith. Step out there. You know, do that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I was telling David before the show, and I've mentioned this many times. When I first started on the show, I used to run out with a little recorder to events, recording stuff. Even if it didn't have anything to do with the show, Danny and I would go to HRC gatherings or whatever, and I would always be maybe one of maybe 2 or 3 black folks there. And not that it bothered me, but it was in the back of my head, and I'm like, I know there's more. Where are they? And so I finally heard, you know, some individuals say, well, you know, we weren't invited, or they're not really embracing our culture. I'm like, you still got to show up. You have to. You got to show up. You can't complain about it, about not being seen, and then you yourself don't show up. On when what was you all published last week? Last Friday was the issue, the 1-year anniversary of the Supreme Court decision, and 4 couples were featured, and Gregory and I were one of the couples, and, you know, I did a public thank you to the Dallas Voice, you know, everybody, for, you know, putting a black face on that, because a lot of people just think that it's white stuff, you know, that's white people stuff. Right. And, you know, I expressed that, you know, sometimes, you know, it's lonely being the torchbearers for a community that doesn't want to come out of the shadows, but Gregory and I do it, and we have all of those things behind us. He's ex-military. I'm minister. You know, was part of the UMC denomination at one point. You know, we're parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. We have all of that stuff there, and it's hard being the only one, but we know the only ones, but we know that there are others, but for whatever reason, they don't want to place themselves in front of the media to share their stories, so that we know that there are more of us out there.
It is part of that general discrimination where, now I've been discriminated against for being gay. My personality is, well, you wouldn't want to work for you anyway. Wouldn't want to rent retail space from you when I had rent retail stores. I mean, I was literally told, after having a store on Cedar Springs, we wanted to move to the West End. I was told by the leasing agent, we don't want those kind of people here.
Wow.
Well, look at West End now. Karma.
The building that closed, it was years later. As the building closed, I went to the leasing office and told them how delighted I was that they were going out of business.
Yeah. And you should have.
You should have.
But it was years later.
Because karma shouldn't work that way. But yeah, I'm glad that you did it.
But I can be an obnoxious. So that way.
like me.
Yes, that's why Buster and I get along so well. But is it because partially not dealing with both racism and homophobia. I'm only dealing with the homophobia. And if you're gay, you can somewhat hide it. Lerone can't, but I can. No, seriously, you can hide it to a certain extent. Not that I do or try to ever, but...
David, I'm butch.
Exactly.
No, I'm not.
But...
Look, yeah, it was sarcastic.
But... is it because I'm not as worried about losing my job? I'm not worried about the other discrimination that's going to come along. You don't know, did I lose the job because I'm black, because I'm gay, because, which part of me do they hate the most? So does that play into it in the black gay, and lesbian community?
In the employment world, neither one of those bothers me because I always know that I'm the best. But within the black community, for me, of course, it can only be homophobia. So that's why I focus on that primarily. With everything that has been happening with our community, and I was thinking this and told Gregory this, I said I have always been a critic of the LGBT community in terms of diversity for years. I mean, wrote many columns for The Voice, about that, addressing it, and people were thinking within our community that I was this angry gay black man when I just wanted to kind of illuminate what was going on. But within the past few years, just to kind of see where all of us collectively have come as a community, I have never been prouder of our community. Do we have a long way to go? Yeah, in some areas we do, but I'm more pro-LGBTQ in terms of activism at this point in my life than I am pro-black, because it's like my people are going to be who they are going to be, I can't change that, but I've got work to do on that other side. So for me, the homophobia is it's a greater issue.
Okay, but the racism in the gay community is still there. It's still there.
It's still there.
I'm wondering also, I know there have been a number of events where we'd love to have a diverse board, or a number of groups. We'd love to have a diverse board. We'd love to have diverse attendance. Is it partially that the white group that's organizing this doesn't know how to reach into the black gay community? The black gay community was not specifically invited. They were invited. Just in a general invite.
I get what you're saying.
In a general invite that everybody's welcome, and when I say everybody, I mean everybody.
Right.
But they didn't feel, well, am I really wanted? Yeah, am I really invited there?
Which I think is crap. Because, if you have a general invitation, it's open to everyone.
Exactly.
And you need to follow up on it. We shouldn't have the expectation that you have to handle us with lace gloves and grab our hands, and that we're all part of one community. So if you feel that something is wrong, do like me. Open your big mouth and say something. And if you offend somebody, that's their response to what you share, but that's on them. So we are not more integrated into the overall community because we're not trying to get in there. We like being separate. On the black side, we have 2 black gay prides happening at the same time. How stupid is that at the time that the white pride was going on?
I thought they merged.
Did they merge?
I think they merged this past year.
I think they did.
Last year?
But we got your point.
Yeah, but that whole little thing, that makes absolutely no sense. Why not have one general pride for the entire community? Programming is different. If you have your bears over here, your Asians there, your blacks, the lesbians there, it's all general programming, and that's a buffet. You choose what foods you want to eat during that pride celebration. It's not rocket science, but we have become accustomed to being separate, and we've got to figure out how to kind of pull it back in. Yeah, because a lot of those barriers do not exist anymore. We no longer have to present 3 forms of ID to get into a nightclub on Cedar Springs. We no longer are like the only one on any of the LGBT organizations' board of directors, unless we want to be.
Right.
It's open now. So, get off our duffs and do something.
And, one other last point I wanted to make about the media, and that is, I'll say, media as far as like the whitewashing. whenever you pick up one of the gay magazines, it's got a pretty white boy on the cover.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just joking. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But there's some black pretty boys too, and some Hispanic pretty boys also.
True.
We don't ever see them on a cover. In movies, overwhelmingly, gay film, which I'm really into, has come a long way. But more than likely, the cast are completely white. You might have one token black person in that film.
Their comic relief.
And their comic relief.
Isn't that a whole Hollywood problem, though?
That is a Hollywood problem, but a lot of the backings of these films are actual. The directors are gay people. How come they're not saying anything? And then last year was the biggest blow up with the first film that depicted the Stonewall. As a matter of fact, the movie was called Stonewall. Anybody who knows anything about the actual events of the Stonewall events know that was started by black and Hispanic drag queens. They're nowhere to be found in this movie, as far as the leads.
And
anyway.
a white lesbian.
And the star of this movie is a white boy, I think, from Iowa.
Eye candy.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, again, a complete whitewashing. What can we do as far as people in the media to change that? That has to be addressed.
We have to start writing our own stories. I wasn't going to reveal it now, and hopefully the people that read are not listening to this, but Tico Theatrical Productions, this will be their 3rd annual Play Pride competition, and there's been a complaint that only the L loosely and a lot of the G is being represented, but no B and absolutely no T. And I wrote a piece called Stonewall's Promise, The Real T, and it focuses on drag queens or trans, let me clear that up, trans women of color. We have to start writing our own stories. The narratives have to come from us. So whoever wrote Stonewall, I'm sure that they were probably Anglo. That's fine. There's plenty of room in the marketplace for storytellers of every race, every gender. But we have to start writing our stories. But then once we write those stories, we've got to get the backing. We have to.
Now, to be fair, white gay people did not flock to that movie.
They did not.
They did not. You're right.
They trashed it.
That movie was
right,
a
David.
huge flop.
A huge flop. They lost millions of dollars.
And I mean, I didn't go see it because I didn't want to see a wrong version of Stonewall. A made-up Hollywood version.
And that's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
I saw the trailers and said absolutely not.
I mean, and your point about we have to start writing and producing our own stories. Absolutely, you're right. But regardless of who tells a story of history, you need to tell it right.
It needs to be. I'm not going to say somewhat accurate because license is taken because of the product. You only have X amount of time to tell that story. So some things may or may not be 100% factual, but as long as you keep it on that line.
It was so wrong, though.
Yeah, it was so wrong
that I haven't seen the film yet, but just from everything
I haven't either. I've read a lot about it, but
we need to take a break. You're listening to Lambda Weekly on 89.3 Knon FM. I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with Lerone Landis. The late Patti Fink will be back with us next week. Our guest today is Buster Spiller. We'll be back with Buster right after this.
Hi, this is Valletta Lil, and I listen to Lambda Weekly. I hope.
And this is Lambda Weekly on 89.3 Knon FM. That's the Valletta Lil. She'll be with us next week. So, yeah.
Just get her.
Of course you can.
See Valletta.
It is good to see Valletta. We're talking about racism in the LGBT community, homophobia in communities of color. Our guest is Buster Spiller. Buster, at the very beginning of the show, you said you're more concerned with homophobia in communities of color.
Correct.
Have you had any other specific instances? Any real hurtful or just who?
It's never hurtful because I have a mouth, so I will put you in your place. But it is always there. But I mean, it happens all the time. I mean, even with family. But, I just kind of stand up for myself. Gregory and I are both the same. Family knows that. Friends, they know that. We have a rock outside our door. If you live in a glass house, throw me. And no one has ever thrown that rock in the 20 years that we've been there. So, we stand up, but so it's all out there, but I don't process it where it hurts me because I'm a lot stronger than that, and then I'll just start calling you out. So
but you've never experienced anything, not from family, but just out in public, from anybody in the black community. But that's good.
No,
that's good.
I use Gregory as an example. We go out to eat. If I want something off of his plate, he's going to, we feed each other in public.
Right.
When we go to the airport to pick each other up or drop each other off, we always kiss openly. We don't kind of crouch under the car. When we are out, we kiss, hug, and, there's no big thing.
Have you done that for years?
For ever since the beginning.
See, and whenever I was in a relationship, I always did that too. It just never occurred to me because that's the way I am. Right. I don't care about everybody else.
Done that.
I have too. So, now the other thing you said at the beginning of the show is racism is something that you've dealt with your whole life. What are some ways that you've had to deal with racism?
I grew up in a community that was pretty well diverse in Flint, a community called the Beecher community. And my friends, my little clan, I had a Filipino, a German black, white, and some blacks. So, it was just really diverse. Didn't really understand racism until I moved to Texas to attend the University of Texas at Arlington. Walking home from my job at Whataburger, Cooper Street used to be they used to cruise, bumper to bumper cars, and I'm walking home, and all of a sudden I hear the N-word, hurled at me, and then I felt something swooshing by my ear, and it was a beer bottle that crashed right next to me, and had it connected, it would have probably tore my ear off. That was the first time that I've ever experienced that. There weren't any black kids in those cars. They were all white kids. So it's like, okay, this stuff is serious. So next time, instead of walking on the sidewalk, I need to kind of walk out in the field because I've got to get home to my dorm room. So let me walk a little further out, because if they're drunk, they're not going to have that good an aim, because you kind of got really close to my ear.
Fortunately, I have a very, very similar story. I grew up in Houston as a child. We then moved to the Dallas-Fort Worth area until I was 12 or 13 when my parents divorced, and I hated it here. I hated Dallas-Fort Worth. Where we grew up in Houston, as far as similar communities, as far as economic status, it was mostly white, but I had my little clan was blacks. There's a large Asian community in Houston. I had a lot of Asian friends, Hispanics and blacks. Didn't remember hearing any of that stuff in Houston. We moved up here. We moved to Hearst. I was in 7th grade, and me and my brother walking home from school, and this happened on numerous occasions. Truck full of white boys driving down the street yelling, "Go back to Africa!"
Yeah.
And I remember going home crying to my mom, like, when are we moving back to Houston? So yeah. And then we're talking like 1985. Not that long ago. So it's, that was my introduction to Dallas.
And I've experienced it in the work world when I worked in banking and was trying to move into a higher position and was interviewed along with 2 other people, and I have the credentials. The guy that the manager, he was a white gay male. And he told me flat out that he did not think that I was capable of doing the work. And it wasn't I was the only black in the office. That he didn't think that I was capable of doing the position. It was loan operations. Instead of just being a clerk moving up, that I was capable of doing the work, and that all I was qualified to do was to type the documents as I was doing. And I was like, wow. And then I knew he was gay. So it's like, why would you say that to me? And kind of project that on me, which is interesting. He's no longer living, and I just left the A&M system as a loan service officer. So, I guess he was pretty wrong.
And let me give you why I'm even asking this. I'm working on a story. A couple of women called me that their daughter had been discriminated against in school. And it's a school up in a northern suburb. And they had never seen anything like it. And there were several things. There were pictures that were sent home with their daughter. Their daughter is black. They're white. They adopted this child. And one of the things in talking to people that I've realized is you grew up in a black family with parents who experienced racism and their parents experienced racism. You knew how to deal with it. Well, these two Jewish lesbians originally from Brooklyn who live in this northern suburb, somebody just discriminated against their daughter who happens to be black. And they're not taking any of this crap.
And they shouldn't.
They shouldn't.
And
Good
they
for them.
shouldn't. And before they called me, because they did not just run to the media, they filed a report with the Department of Education. The school is being investigated by the Civil Rights Division.
That's how you do it.
That's how you do it.
They're not taking any garbage on this because it's their daughter. And it never occurred to them that their daughter, who is a straight A student, good kid, well behaved. Yeah, I don't know why I need to say that, but I mean, she's a good kid in school. She's not a troublemaker type kid at all. But they never experienced anything like this.
And it's ugly.
One of the moms has been banned from the school.
Oh, she sounds like me. Gregory would still be allowed to go, but I had that issue with Andrew's school. And we're getting ready to actually go through it again because we're in the process of doing foster to adopt. Brother and sister, 14 and 13. And my primary concern is going to be homophobia.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I will tell them, just like I told Andrew, if there's something that happens, you do not have to deal with it. Tell me. I got this.
Yeah.
Well, why should your kids have to deal with that?
They're just there to learn.
Right.
In school, did you have that kind of discrimination at all? Well, you grew up in Michigan.
I grew up in Michigan, and I didn't have that type of discrimination because I wasn't even dealing with my sexuality. And then race issues were non-existent for me there. Again, all of this stuff came to a head here in Texas.
Yeah.
The great old
And
state
Lerone,
of Texas.
in school, you never dealt with anything like that?
You know, in school, it was more, it wasn't as blatant. It was like, just kind of suggested, but yeah, it was still racism.
The typical whisper campaign.
Exactly. Yeah. By the time I got to high school,
whatever.
Yeah,
Now,
whatever.
Here's my experience. We didn't have a lot of black kids in our school. The school was like half Italian, half Jewish. And so the black kids that were in the school, they were just our friends too. I mean, they were. One kid, our senior year, he was elected class president. The school just celebrated over the last couple of years its 100th anniversary. So, the school was already like 60 years old at the time. I didn't find this out till our 40th reunion. It was the first time that a black kid had been elected president of a class. And the reason he was elected is we knew him since kindergarten.
Yes, I mean,
he had been active. He had been active in student government. He was the logical choice.
Right.
It didn't occur to us. I didn't know until our 40th reunion. Some people were talking about it, and the administration of the school apparently was really upset and worried that we had a black class president.
Wow.
I don't know
again,
what
it was the older generation. It wasn't your generation.
Right. No, this would be like my grandfather's generation.
Exactly.
The principal of our school was about to retire at that time, so it really was an older generation. But still, I mean, it never occurred to me.
One other topic I want to ask you about that's been a hot topic on social media in the past couple of years, and that is dating within the LGBT community, particularly interracial dating. And a lot of people call this preference. Some people call it discrimination. But whenever a person of color asks out a white person, and that white person says, no, I'm not into blacks, I'm not into Asians, I'm not into Hispanics or whatever.
No fat, no femmes, no blacks.
Yeah, exactly. Is that preference or is that racism?
That's prejudice. I don't think it's racism. It's prejudice because it's just their prejudice. It's also very stupid. I'm in a lot of Facebook LGBT groups that have basically all black members, and that comes up a lot.
It does.
And I'm normally one of like maybe 3 that is like, love is love, love the heart loves what it loves. I'm like one of those, hippie kids that's like, no, they shouldn't do that. We need to stick with our own race. And my thing is, but where have you gotten so far sticking with your own race? There may be a white guy, an Asian guy, Latino guy that is the right guy for you, but you keep passing them up because you're looking for Pookie and Tyrone.
Again, my answer to that when I've been asked, do you go out with black people? It's like, depends on the person. I don't go out with a black person. I go out with a person.
Right, exactly.
But the first time I was asked that, it was one of those I didn't know how to answer.
Right.
Because it was just an odd question to me. But since then, my answer just became, it just depends on the person.
Our community, it's like you have committed treason. It is, it is really that big an issue. And again, it mirrors what's in the broader black community. That you cannot go outside of the race. Right. Because let me very quickly, a friend of mine, he introduced his boyfriend at the time to his grandmother, and his grandmother, talked about the size difference, who was the male or female, per her assessment, and then she said, well, you got one thing right, he's black. His grandmother said that, and it's like, wow.
But
really?
Right.
But for her, it was half okay because he was black.
Really? I think that it might be a larger issue in the black community, but I think that happens in a lot of communities. I told a story about this girl that you and I met at prom years ago at one of the teen proms, and when she came out to her mom said, "Oh, do you have a girlfriend?" She said, "Yeah." She goes, "Is she black?" And her mom, when the girl's like, "No," she goes, "Okay, fine. So long as you don't bring a black woman home, I'm fine." So
isn't that?
Yeah.
Which makes no sense.
It makes no sense.
Is part? In the white community, a lot of it is nothing more than bigotry. Some people will say, "Well, it's a matter of my preference," but if you've never given yourself the opportunity to get to know somebody,
exactly.
And to just go out on a date with somebody, going out on a date can be nothing more than dinner.
It may be a preference because with me, I'll look at white guys. If they fine, they fine.
Yeah, fine is fine.
Fine is fine. It don't matter.
Right.
But I've never dated a white guy. Because my preference are men that are the color of this microphone foam, even though Gregory's not. But it's just some.
Okay, but here's my question. Yeah. On the white side, I can say probably most of it is nothing more than bigotry. Some of it might be preference and, whatever. There are people who've dated and whatever, and it turns out who they're attracted to.
It could be.
On the black side, do you think it's more a matter of defensiveness, or at least partially? Like, I'm not going to put myself in that position. I don't want...
I don't think so.
You don't think so? Okay.
I don't think so.
Well, for me, it's a gray area. I think sometimes it could very well genuinely be a preference thing. Some people are attracted to redheads. Some people are attracted to somebody with a big butt. I don't know. Whatever. That's your preference. But I do think, when you specify the only reason why you're not giving this person of color a shot is because of their color of skin, that's bigotry. And it does happen. I've heard white guys say, such and such he's cute, we get along, whatever, but I just can't date I can't date a black person. Really?
But it's the same with on the other side too, because we will say we're not going to date a white person because typically the thing is we don't have anything culturally in common. That will be, and that's the excuse that I hear most often. But I've had a lot of friends that were couples, that were interracial couples. I have quite a few. So for me, it's much to do about nothing. Love is love.
Love is love. Before the show, David, you made a good point, and that was, a lot of it has to do with your family and how you were raised.
Thank you.
I remember once when Denny and I first started dating, 19 years ago, one of my coworkers at the time was just like, wow, what do y'all's parents say? I'm like, what do you mean, what do our parents say? He goes, but you dating a white guy and him dating a black guy. I go, you know what? It has never come up. And there probably won't ever. It's just not an issue. Denny's parents have never brought it up. My parents have never brought it up. Now, the issue with my parents was the fact that I was dating a guy. They could be polka dotted. They don't. They could care less what color they were. For the fact that I was dating a guy, that was the issue. Again, back to the homophobia. So,
although once your father became a grandfather,
a
lot of that went out the window.
That kind of changed it. Yeah, it changed it to him big time.
And in Danny's family, as much as they liked you, they love their granddaughter.
No, they love their granddaughter.
So, did you find that also once you were kids?
No one even cared.
Oh, okay.
That was the
That's
thing.
good.
It was like, our family, Gregory and I are really the heads of our family. People look to us for advice, information, how to do. We're like the authority figures. So they know not to really go there or cross us that way. So they don't. They know because we're both kind of crazy in our own little unique way. And
Buster, I want to thank you for being with us. We're just about out of time. We need to continue this discussion.
we'll come back anytime to discuss
we'd love to have
any
you.
subject.
Good luck with the playwriting contest.
I hope I get that.
Yeah.
Because I might even dress up for you, David.
Oh, that would be nice.
Show you my legs.
Oh, that I want to see. That I want to see. Put them on the front of the papers.
There you go.
Our guest next week is Valletta Lil, former city council person. Have a good week. We'll see you then.
This is William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I welcome you to another Two Hats special of community events. Let's look in and see what's really happening.